In the shadows of power, where secrets are currency and trust is a luxury few can afford, one small device the size of a button can bring down an entire kingdom. When a morning sun cast its golden rays through the ornate windows of Kensington Palace on that fateful Tuesday in March, no one could have predicted that a routine security sweep would uncover a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of the British establishment. What started as William's concern about leaked private conversations would spiral into a lockdown that lasted 72 hours, involving MI5, Scotland Yard's counterterrorism unit, and a web of surveillance that had been operating under their noses for months. The discovery wasn't just about one microphone. It was about how close unknown enemies had come to penetrating the very heart of the monarchy. The question that would haunt everyone involved wasn't just who planted the device, but how many other ears had been listening to the most intimate and sensitive conversations of the future King of England. In a world where information is power, someone had been stealing the crown's most valuable secrets, one whispered conversation at a time. This is the true story of how a single security guard's sharp eye and William's decisive action prevented what intelligence officials would later call the most serious breach of royal security since the troubles of the 1990s. But the real shock wasn't the discovery itself. It was learning who had been behind it all along. The morning of March 15th began like any other Tuesday at Kensington Palace. The spring air carried the scent of blooming daffodils from the palace gardens, and the usual bustle of staff preparing for another day of royal duties filled the corridors. Prince William had arrived early, as was his custom, to review his schedule before the day's official engagements began. Security guard Martin Thompson had been working the palace grounds for 7 years. At 52, he was known for his meticulous attention to detail and his uncanny ability to notice things others missed. His colleagues often joked that Martin could spot a paperclip out of place from across a room. On this particular morning, that skill would prove invaluable in ways no one could have imagined. William's private office, located in the east wing of the palace, was a sanctuary where he conducted his most sensitive business. The room, with its deep mahogany paneling and tall windows overlooking the gardens, had hosted countless confidential conversations about everything from state matters to personal family issues. It was here that William felt most comfortable discussing delicate subjects with his advisors, knowing that the room had been swept for surveillance devices just the week before. Martin was conducting his routine morning security check when something caught his eye. As he examined the area behind William's desk, a tiny glint of metal near the base of an antique lamp seemed out of place. Most people would have dismissed it as nothing more than a reflection from the lamp's brass fittings, but Martin's trained eye recognized that something wasn't quite right. The device was incredibly small, no larger than a shirt button, and had been positioned with such precision that it was virtually invisible unless viewed from exactly the right angle. It was clear that whoever had placed it there possessed both sophisticated equipment and intimate knowledge of the office layout. The craftsmanship was professional grade, suggesting this wasn't the work of an amateur or opportunistic intruder. William was in the middle of reviewing correspondence when Martin knocked on his door. The security guard's usually calm demeanor showed signs of tension that immediately put the prince on alert. Martin requested a private word, and something in his voice made William set aside his papers without question. Speaking in hushed tones, Martin explained his discovery. William's initial reaction was disbelief, followed quickly by a cold anger that those close to him recognized as particularly dangerous. The prince examined the device himself, careful not to disturb it while Martin explained how it had been concealed and why he was certain it was a listening device. The implications hit William immediately. This office had been the site of numerous sensitive conversations over the past months. Discussions about security arrangements, family matters, diplomatic issues, and even personal conversations with Catherine had all taken place within range of this hidden microphone. The violation of privacy was profound, but the potential security implications were even more concerning. William's first instinct was to have the device removed immediately, but Martin wisely counseled patience. If this was indeed a sophisticated surveillance operation, Removing the device too quickly might alert whoever was behind it that their activities had been discovered. Instead, they needed to approach this methodically, treating it as the serious security breach it potentially represented. The prince made his first critical decision of what would become a very long day. He instructed Martin to secure the office immediately and to ensure that no one else entered until further notice. William then personally contacted the head of royal protection, bypassing the usual chain of command to ensure that word of the discovery remained contained to the smallest possible circle. Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Mitchell had been head of royal protection for 3 years. Her background in counterterrorism and her reputation for discretion had made her the obvious choice for the position. When her secure phone rang that Tuesday morning, she was in the middle of reviewing security arrangements for an upcoming state visit. William's call changed her priorities instantly. Within 30 minutes, Mitchell and a small team of trusted specialists had arrived at the palace. The team included a surveillance technology expert from MI5 and a senior officer from the Metropolitan Police's counterterrorism unit. The decision to involve these particular specialists reflected the seriousness with which William was treating the situation. The initial examination of the device confirmed Martin's assessment. It was indeed a highly sophisticated listening device, far more advanced than anything typically available to civilian surveillance operations. The technology appeared to be military-grade, with capabilities that suggested it could transmit conversations in real time to receivers located considerable distances away. What troubled the experts most was the device's placement and concealment. Getting it into position would have required not just access to the office, but also detailed knowledge of the room's layout, the prince's daily routines, and the palace's security procedures. This level of information suggested that the perpetrator was either an insider or had received assistance from someone with intimate knowledge of palace operations. The team's technical analysis revealed additional disturbing details. The device appeared to have been in place for at least several weeks, possibly longer. Its battery life suggested it was designed for long-term surveillance, and the quality of its components indicated significant financial backing behind the operation. This wasn't a case of tabloid journalism or amateur curiosity. It was professional-grade espionage. William made his second major decision of the day. Rather than simply removing the device and conducting a standard investigation, he ordered a complete lockdown of the palace. No one would be permitted to leave the grounds until a thorough security sweep had been completed. The official explanation given to staff was that a routine security exercise was being conducted, but the reality was far more serious. The lockdown decision reflected William's understanding that if one device had been planted, there were likely others. The sophistication of the operation suggested a well-funded and professional adversary who wouldn't have relied on a single surveillance point. A comprehensive sweep was necessary to determine the full extent of the breach. The team began the painstaking process of examining every room in the palace where sensitive conversations might have taken place. Using specialized detection equipment, they methodically worked their way through William's private apartments, meeting rooms, offices, and even recreational spaces where informal but important discussions might have occurred. The psychological impact on William was significant. The prince had always been conscious of living under public scrutiny, but the knowledge that private conversations in what he considered his most secure space had been monitored was deeply unsettling. The violation felt personal in a way that public media attention never had. As the morning progressed, the investigation team's concerns grew. The device they had discovered was too sophisticated and too well-placed to be an isolated incident. Someone had invested considerable time, money, and effort into this surveillance operation. The question was no longer just who was responsible, but how extensive the breach had been and what information might have been compromised. The decision to maintain the lockdown while the investigation continued was controversial even among William's closest advisors. Such an extreme measure would inevitably attract attention and raise questions that would be difficult to answer without revealing the true reason for the security alert. However, William remained firm in his conviction that the situation required extraordinary measures. By midday, The investigation had expanded beyond the immediate area of discovery. The team was examining staff access records, reviewing security footage, and beginning the delicate process of determining who might have had the opportunity and motive to plant surveillance devices. The list of potential suspects was longer than anyone wanted to acknowledge. The morning's events had transformed what should have been a routine Tuesday into the beginning of what would become one of the most serious security investigations in recent royal history. The discovery of a single small device had opened a window into a world of professional surveillance and espionage that reached closer to the heart of the monarchy than anyone had imagined possible. As the investigation continued, one thing became increasingly clear. This was just the beginning. The device Martin had discovered was likely part of a much larger operation, and uncovering the full extent of the surveillance network would require resources, expertise, and a level of security consciousness that would fundamentally change how the royal household operated. The afternoon brought devastating revelations that transformed the investigation from a serious security breach into a full-scale counterintelligence operation. The specialized sweep teams, now reinforced with additional experts from Government Communications Headquarters, had discovered not one but 7 additional surveillance devices strategically placed throughout the palace's most sensitive areas. Detective Chief Inspector Mitchell stood in the palace's secure communications room, studying the layout map where red pins now marked each discovery location. The pattern was chilling in its precision and professionalism. Devices had been found in the private dining room, where William and Catherine often discussed family matters, in the small conference room used for briefings with government officials, and, most disturbingly, in the nursery area where conversations about the children's security arrangements regularly took place. The technical analysis painted an even more troubling picture. Each device was part of a coordinated network designed to provide comprehensive surveillance coverage of the royal family's private communications. The sophistication of the system suggested months of planning and reconnaissance. Someone had studied the family's routines, identified their most private spaces, and systematically compromised their security. William's reaction to each new discovery grew more intense. The prince, known for his usual composure under pressure, was struggling to contain his anger at what he was beginning to understand was a massive violation of his family's privacy and safety. The presence of surveillance equipment near his children's rooms was particularly infuriating, representing a line that should never have been crossed. The investigation team's communications expert, Dr. Amanda Foster from GCHQ, delivered the most shocking revelation of the afternoon. The devices weren't just recording conversations. They were transmitting them in real time to receivers located approximately 3 miles from the palace. The signal strength and transmission pattern suggested that someone had been monitoring royal conversations as they happened, not simply collecting recordings for later analysis. The implications were staggering. Whoever was behind this operation had been privy to discussions about state visits, security arrangements, diplomatic matters, and intimate family conversations for weeks, possibly months. They had effectively been sitting in on the most private moments of the future king's life, collecting intelligence that could be used for any number of purposes. William made the decision to expand the lockdown to include a complete communications blackout. All electronic devices within the palace were to be surrendered temporarily, and all communications with the outside world were to be conducted only through secure government channels. The prince understood that if the perpetrators were monitoring communications in real time, they needed to be cut off from their sources immediately. The staff reaction to the expanded security measures was mixed. While most understood the seriousness of the situation, the sudden restrictions, and the obvious presence of intelligence personnel created an atmosphere of suspicion and unease. Long-serving staff members who had never before had their loyalty questioned found themselves subject to detailed background checks and restricted access to areas they had freely entered for years. Martin Thompson, the security guard whose sharp eye had initiated the investigation, found himself in the unusual position of being both a hero and a key witness in a major security investigation. His detailed knowledge of palace routines and His observations about unusual activities over the past weeks became crucial to understanding how the surveillance network had been established. The forensic examination of the devices revealed additional disturbing details. The technology was so advanced that it included anti-detection features designed to avoid discovery during routine security sweeps. The fact that the devices had been found at all was due largely to Martin's exceptional observational skills and an element of luck when morning light hit the first device at exactly the right angle. Dr. Foster's analysis suggested that the surveillance operation had been running for approximately 3 months. During that time, the perpetrators would have had access to countless private conversations, including sensitive discussions about upcoming royal engagements, security procedures, family matters, and even personal conflicts and concerns that William had shared with his closest advisors. The psychological warfare aspect of the surveillance became apparent as the team analyzed what information the perpetrators might have accessed. Knowledge of private conversations could be used not just for intelligence gathering, but for psychological manipulation, blackmail, or simply to cause distress by demonstrating how thoroughly the family's privacy had been violated. William's security briefings took on new urgency as the scale of the breach became clear. The prince was forced to consider the possibility that every major decision he had made in recent months might have been influenced by intelligence that was already in hostile hands. The strategic advantage that private deliberation typically provided had been completely compromised. The investigation team began the complex process of damage assessment, trying to determine exactly what conversations might have been monitored and what sensitive information might have been compromised. This required reviewing William's calendar for the past 3 months, identifying all private meetings and discussions that had taken place in the compromised areas, and assessing the potential intelligence value of each conversation. Catherine's involvement in the crisis deepened the personal impact for William. The princess had been present for many of the conversations that might have been monitored, including discussions about their children's education, security arrangements, and private family matters. The violation of her privacy and the potential threat to their children's safety added an emotional dimension to what was already a serious security crisis. The technical team's efforts to trace the signal destination led them to a sophisticated receiving station that had been established in an office building several miles from the palace. The discovery of this facility confirmed that they were dealing with a professional espionage operation with significant resources and technical capabilities. The receiving station was equipped with advanced computers, signal processing equipment, and secure communication systems that would have cost hundreds of thousands of pounds to establish. The first arrest came late in the afternoon when police raided the building housing the receiving station. 2 individuals were taken into custody, but initial interrogations revealed that they were likely low-level operatives rather than the principals behind the operation. The sophistication of the surveillance network suggested that the real decision-makers remained hidden behind layers of operational security. William's decision to maintain the palace lockdown overnight reflected his understanding that the investigation was far from complete. The discovery of the surveillance network and the arrest of 2 operatives might actually increase the danger if other members of the organization decided to take more direct action to protect their operation or eliminate evidence of their activities. The evening brought a secure video conference with senior government officials, including representatives from the Prime Minister's office, the intelligence services, and the Metropolitan Police. The consensus was that the surveillance operation represented a serious threat to national security, given the sensitive government information that William regularly discussed in his role as heir to the throne. The decision was made to classify the entire investigation at the highest levels of government security. Information about the surveillance network would be restricted to those with an absolute need to know, and even then, details would be compartmentalized to prevent any single individual from having access to the complete picture. This level of classification reflected the government's assessment that the operation represented a significant intelligence coup for whoever was behind it. As night fell over the locked-down palace, the investigation team continued their painstaking work. Additional sweeps were conducted in areas that hadn't been thoroughly examined earlier, and technical experts worked to extract data from the captured surveillance devices that might provide clues about their origin and operation. The psychological impact on the royal household was profound. Staff members who had worked in the palace for decades found themselves questioning whether their colleagues could be trusted, while the family itself grappled with the realization that their most private conversations had been monitored by unknown adversaries. The sense of violation was complete and devastating. The investigation's expansion to include analysis of all personnel who had had access to the compromised areas over the past 6 months created additional tension. Background checks that had been routine when staff members were first hired were now being conducted again with a level of scrutiny that many found unsettling and intrusive. By the end of the second day, the investigation had evolved from a response to a single discovered device into a comprehensive counterintelligence operation involving multiple government agencies and dozens of specialists. The simple security alert that had begun with Martin Thompson's sharp observation had become one of the most serious breaches of royal security in modern history. The third day of the crisis brought breakthrough revelations that would shake the royal household to its foundation. Dr. Amanda Foster's technical analysis had yielded results that no one was prepared for. The surveillance devices contained digital fingerprints that traced back to equipment purchased by someone with legitimate access to palace procurement systems. The morning briefing in the palace's secure command center was tense with anticipation. Detective Chief Inspector Mitchell had assembled the core investigation team to review findings that would fundamentally change the direction of their inquiry. What had initially appeared to be an external espionage operation was revealing itself to be something far more troubling, an inside job. The forensic accountants who had been brought in to trace the purchase of surveillance equipment had uncovered a paper trail that led directly to palace administrative systems. Someone with authorized access had used legitimate procurement channels to acquire components that were then assembled into the sophisticated surveillance network. The betrayal wasn't just professional, it was personal. William's reaction to learning that the surveillance operation was an inside job was a mixture of shock, anger, and deep hurt. The prince had always prided himself on treating palace staff as an extended family, fostering an atmosphere of trust and mutual respect that went far beyond typical employer-employee relationships. The discovery that someone within that trusted circle had violated that confidence struck him personally. The investigation team's analysis of access records and personnel files had narrowed the list of potential suspects to fewer than 20 individuals. Each person on the list had both the technical knowledge and the access necessary to install the surveillance devices, and, more importantly, each had been present during the time periods when the devices were believed to have been installed. Deputy Administrator James Morrison had worked at the palace for 12 years and was responsible for coordinating maintenance and technical services throughout the royal residences. His position gave him virtually unlimited access to all areas of the palace, often during off hours when surveillance installation would be less likely to be observed. When investigators examined his recent activities more closely, disturbing patterns began to emerge. Morrison's financial records showed deposits totaling over £200,000 in the past 6 months, amounts that far exceeded his official salary and couldn't be explained by any legitimate sources of income. The deposits were structured to avoid automatic reporting requirements and came from accounts traced to shell companies with connections to foreign intelligence services. The confrontation with Morrison took place in a secure room within the palace complex. Detective Chief Inspector Mitchell, accompanied by William himself, presented the evidence methodically. Morrison's initial denials quickly crumbled when faced with the technical evidence, financial records, and timeline analysis that clearly demonstrated his involvement. The confession that followed was devastating in its scope and implications. Morrison revealed that he had been recruited 18 months earlier by individuals claiming to represent a private security firm conducting authorized testing of palace security systems. The gradual escalation from providing floor plans and schedules to actually installing surveillance equipment had been so subtle that Morrison claimed he hadn't fully understood the implications of his actions until it was too late to withdraw. The intelligence assessment that followed Morrison's confession painted a picture of a sophisticated recruitment and manipulation operation. Foreign intelligence services had identified Morrison as a potential asset, gradually compromising him through a combination of financial incentives and psychological manipulation. His detailed knowledge of palace operations had made him an ideal target for recruitment. Williams' decision to personally participate in Morrison's interrogation reflected his need to understand not just what had happened, but why someone he had trusted had betrayed that confidence. The prince's questions focused as much on Morrison's motivations and the recruitment process as on the technical details of the surveillance operation. The revelation that Morrison had been providing intelligence for 18 months meant that the surveillance network discovered the previous day was only the most recent phase of a much longer intelligence operation. For more than a year, detailed information about royal family routines, security procedures, upcoming events, and private conversations have been flowing to hostile intelligence services. The scope of the intelligence breach required a complete reassessment of royal security procedures and upcoming events. Plans for state visits, public appearances, and even private family activities would need to be revised based on the assumption that detailed advance information had been compromised. The operational impact was enormous and would require months of careful planning to address. Dr. Foster's continued analysis of the surveillance network revealed additional layers of sophistication that hadn't been apparent in the initial assessment. The devices were part of a larger system that included not just audio surveillance, but also network intrusion capabilities designed to access computer systems and communications equipment within the palace. The discovery that digital systems had also been compromised forced an emergency shutdown of all palace computer networks and communication systems. IT specialists from the Government Cybersecurity Center were brought in to conduct a complete forensic analysis of every computer, server, and communications device that might have been accessed through the surveillance network. Williams' most difficult decision of the crisis came when investigators recommended conducting polygraph examinations of all senior palace staff members. The prince understood the necessity of the recommendation, but was deeply troubled by the implications for the trust-based relationships that had always characterized his household management style. The polygraph sessions, conducted by specialist interrogators from the intelligence services, created an atmosphere of suspicion and fear among staff members who had never before had their loyalty questioned. Long-serving employees who had dedicated their careers to royal service found themselves subjected to detailed questioning about their financial situations, personal relationships, and possible contacts with foreign nationals. Catherine's involvement in the investigation deepened when analysis revealed that conversations in the family's private quarters had also been monitored. The princess was forced to participate in damage assessments that required her to recall private conversations and family discussions that might have been overheard and could potentially be used against the family or the monarchy itself. The international implications of the intelligence breach became clear when foreign intelligence services began sharing information about similar operations they had detected targeting other government officials and diplomatic personnel. The surveillance of the royal family appeared to be part of a broader intelligence campaign designed to penetrate the highest levels of British government and society. The arrest of Morrison's handlers, identified through surveillance of his communications and financial transfers, led to the discovery of an extensive intelligence network operating throughout London. The network included diplomatic personnel, business executives, academics, and other seemingly legitimate individuals who were actually intelligence officers or assets working to penetrate British institutions. Williams' decision to authorize the use of counter-surveillance measures against the identified intelligence network marked a significant escalation in the British response to the operation. The prince understood that protecting his family and the monarchy required more than just defensive measures. It demanded an active response to disrupt the hostile intelligence activities that had targeted them. The psychological assessment of Morrison revealed the sophisticated nature of his recruitment and the careful manipulation that had been used to compromise him. Intelligence psychologists determined that Morrison had been specifically selected because of his access, his financial vulnerabilities, and psychological factors that made him susceptible to recruitment and control. The evening brought a secure briefing for senior government officials about the full scope of the intelligence operation and its implications for national security. The surveillance of royal family communications was only one aspect of a much larger intelligence campaign that had penetrated multiple levels of British government and society. The decision to maintain Morrison in custody while using him as a source of information about the broader intelligence network required careful consideration of legal and ethical issues. The prince was determined to extract maximum value from Morrison's cooperation while ensuring that justice was served for his betrayal of trust. As the third day of the crisis concluded, the investigation had evolved from a response to discovered surveillance devices into a comprehensive counterintelligence operation with implications far beyond the royal household. The betrayal by a trusted insider had opened a window into a sophisticated intelligence operation that threatened the security of the monarchy and the British government itself. The fourth day of the crisis brought international ramifications that elevated the palace surveillance breach from a domestic security incident to a matter of global intelligence concern. Intelligence agencies from allied nations had begun sharing information about similar operations targeting government officials, diplomats, and royal families across Europe and North America, revealing a coordinated campaign of unprecedented scope and sophistication. The secure video conference that opened the day included representatives from the CIA, France's DGSE, Germany's BND, and Canada's SIS. Each agency reported similar patterns of recruitment, surveillance, and intelligence gathering targeting their most sensitive government facilities and personnel. The operation against the British royal family was part of a much larger intelligence campaign that had been running for over 2 years. Dr. Foster's overnight analysis of the digital intrusion capabilities discovered in the surveillance network had revealed the true scope of the intelligence breach. The hostile actors hadn't just been listening to conversations. They had gained access to email systems, calendar applications, contact databases, and even draft documents stored on palace computer networks. The digital penetration was so complete that virtually every electronic communication within the royal household had been compromised. William's morning briefing included a devastating assessment of the information that had been accessed over the 18-month period of Morrison's cooperation. The compromised material included advanced schedules for royal engagements, detailed security arrangements, personal correspondence between family members, medical information about the children, and sensitive diplomatic communications that could affect Britain's international relationships. The forensic IT specialist had discovered that the intrusion software installed through Morrison's access had sophisticated capabilities, including keylogger functions that recorded everything typed on compromised computers, screen capture capabilities that photographed documents as they were being read, and network mapping tools that had provided complete blueprints of the palace's digital infrastructure. Detective Chief Inspector Mitchell's interrogation of Morrison had yielded additional intelligence about the operational methods used by his handlers. The recruitment process had been gradual and carefully planned, beginning with seemingly innocent requests for publicly available information and gradually escalating to more sensitive intelligence collection. Morrison's handlers had used a combination of financial incentives, psychological manipulation, and subtle threats to maintain control over their asset. The revelation that Morrison's recruitment had included training in counter-surveillance and operational security meant that he had been taught to avoid detection and to identify potential threats to the operation. This training explained how the surveillance network had remained undetected for so long despite regular security sweeps and the presence of sophisticated detection equipment. William's decision to authorize a complete reconstruction of the palace's digital infrastructure reflected his understanding that the compromise was so thorough that simply removing the known intrusion software would be insufficient. Every computer system, communications device, and piece of digital equipment would need to be replaced or completely rebuilt to ensure that hidden backdoors and surveillance capabilities were eliminated. The international manhunt for Morrison's handlers and The broader intelligence network had led to arrests in 7 countries within the past 24 hours. The coordinated law enforcement operation revealed the global scope of the intelligence campaign and the resources that had been devoted to penetrating allied government institutions. The arrested individuals included diplomatic personnel, business executives, academics, and other professionals who had been operating under deep cover for years. The damage assessment conducted by the government's most senior intelligence analysts painted a sobering picture of the intelligence coup that the hostile operation had achieved. The information gathered from the royal household alone would have provided unprecedented insights into British government decision-making, diplomatic strategies, security procedures, and personal vulnerabilities of key leadership figures. Catherine's private meeting with intelligence debriefers revealed additional concerns about the personal safety implications of the surveillance operation. The detailed monitoring of family routines, the children's schedules, and security arrangements have provided potential adversaries with the information necessary to plan more direct actions against the royal family if they chose to escalate beyond passive intelligence gathering. The psychological impact assessment conducted by government specialists revealed that the royal family's sense of security and privacy had been fundamentally damaged by the revelation of the extensive surveillance. The knowledge that their most intimate conversations and private moments had been monitored for months created lasting effects that would require ongoing support and counseling to address. The technical analysis of the surveillance equipment had revealed manufacturing signatures that traced the devices to state-sponsored intelligence programs. The sophistication and cost of the technology confirmed that the operation had been backed by significant government resources rather than criminal organizations or non-state actors seeking financial gain through blackmail or information sales. William's consultation with constitutional experts about the implications of the intelligence breach for the monarchy's constitutional role added another dimension to the crisis. The compromise of royal communications and the potential for foreign intelligence services to have gained insights into the monarchy's relationship with the government raised questions about the security of Britain's constitutional system itself. The emergency session of the Privy Council convened to address the constitutional and national security implications of the surveillance operation was conducted under unprecedented security conditions. The revelation that foreign intelligence services had penetrated the royal household to such an extent required immediate consideration of additional protective measures and constitutional safeguards. The investigation team's analysis of Morrison's financial records revealed the sophisticated money laundering operation that had been used to compensate him for his cooperation. The payment structure had been designed to avoid detection while providing sufficient incentive to maintain his cooperation over an extended period. The financial arrangements suggested that Morrison had been viewed as a long-term asset rather than a short-term source of information. The counterintelligence operation that had been initiated in response to the surveillance discovery was beginning to yield results beyond the immediate arrests. Intelligence agencies were using the information gathered from the investigation to identify other potential assets and operations, creating opportunities to disrupt broader intelligence activities that had previously been undetected. The secure communications analysis conducted by GCHQ specialists revealed that the surveillance operation had included capabilities to intercept and decode encrypted communication systems that were thought to be secure. This discovery forced a complete review of communication security procedures not just for the royal family, but for senior government officials and military commanders who used similar systems. William's decision to personally review the security files of every individual who would continue to have access to the royal household reflected his determination to prevent any similar breach in the future. The prince understood that rebuilding trust would require not just improved security procedures, but also personal involvement in ensuring that everyone around him could be completely trusted. The international diplomatic implications of the surveillance operation became apparent when several allied nations requested briefings about the scope of the intelligence breach and its potential impact on shared intelligence and diplomatic communications. The revelation that royal family communications had been compromised raised concerns about the security of information that had been shared with Britain's closest allies. The media management challenge created by the ongoing lockdown and the visible presence of intelligence personnel at the palace required careful coordination between the royal communications team and government press specialists. Maintaining operational security while addressing inevitable speculation about the unusual security activity demanded a level of media management that tested the capabilities of both teams. The evening brought confirmation that the surveillance operation had been successfully disrupted and that the immediate threat to the royal family had been neutralized. However, the investigation team's assessment was that the full extent of the intelligence breach and its long-term implications would require months of additional analysis to understand completely. As the fourth day concluded, the crisis had evolved from a domestic security incident into an international intelligence operation that had exposed vulnerabilities in the security systems protecting Britain's most senior leadership. The betrayal by Morrison had opened a window into a sophisticated and well-resourced intelligence campaign that threatened the foundations of Allied government security systems. The final phase of the security crisis brought both resolution and the sobering realization that the royal household would never return to its previous way of operating. The comprehensive investigation had revealed an intelligence breach so extensive that it required fundamental changes to how the monarchy approached security, communications, and even daily operations within the palace. The morning of the fifth day began with a secure briefing that would determine the future of palace security operations. The intelligence assessment team, now expanded to include representatives from the National Security Council, presented their final analysis of the surveillance operation and its long-term implications. The conclusions were stark. The intelligence breach had been so thorough that virtually every aspect of royal family life had been compromised. Dr. Foster's technical team had completed their forensic analysis of all electronic systems within the palace complex. The results confirmed that the intrusion had been far more extensive than initially believed. The hostile intelligence operation had gained access to backup systems, archive communications, digital photograph collections, and even security system databases that contained detailed information about protective arrangements and emergency procedures. William's decision to implement a completely new security protocol reflected his understanding that traditional approaches to royal protection were insufficient against modern intelligence threats. The new protocols would include advanced counter-surveillance measures, compartmentalized information systems, and a fundamental restructuring of how sensitive communications were handled throughout the royal household. The psychological assessment of the royal family, conducted by government specialists, revealed lasting effect from the revelation that their private lives had been so thoroughly monitored. The knowledge that intimate family conversations, personal concerns about their children, and private moments between William and Catherine had all been recorded and analyzed by foreign intelligence services created a sense of violation that would require ongoing professional support to address. Detective Chief Inspector Mitchell's final report on the investigation detailed the sophisticated nature of the intelligence operation and the professional tradecraft that had been employed to maintain it undetected for so long. The operation had included multiple layers of operational security, backup systems to ensure continuity if primary surveillance methods were discovered, and carefully planned extraction procedures to protect the intelligence network if the operation was compromised. The international coordination that had developed in response to the surveillance discovery had led to the disruption of intelligence operations in 12 countries within the past week. The sharing of technical intelligence and operational methods discovered during the palace investigation had enabled Allied intelligence services to identify and neutralize similar operations that had been targeting their own government institutions. Morrison's continued cooperation with investigators had provided detailed insight into the recruitment and operational methods used by hostile intelligence services. His debriefing revealed that the operation against the royal family was part of a broader campaign specifically designed to penetrate the personal lives of senior government officials and their families, gathering intelligence that could be used for influence operations, blackmail, or strategic planning. The legal proceedings against Morrison and his handlers would be conducted under special security arrangements due to the classified nature of the evidence and the ongoing intelligence operations that had been discovered during the investigation. The decision to prosecute under the Official Secrets Act reflected the government's assessment that the operation constituted a serious threat to national security rather than simply a violation of privacy. William's personal involvement in developing the new security protocols demonstrated his commitment to ensuring that such a breach could never occur again. The prince worked directly with intelligence specialists and security experts to design systems that would protect his family's privacy while maintaining the openness and accessibility that had always characterized the modern monarchy's relationship with the British people. The financial investigation had revealed that the intelligence operation had cost several million pounds to establish and maintain, confirming that it had been backed by significant government resources rather than criminal organizations. The sophisticated equipment, extensive training of operatives, and long-term planning required for the operation indicated state-level sponsorship and strategic importance to the hostile intelligence service. The constitutional implications of the surveillance operation were addressed in a special session with the Prime Minister and senior constitutional experts. The compromise of royal communications had raised questions about the security of the monarchy's constitutional role and the potential for foreign influence on the relationship between the crown and the government. New protocols were established to ensure the security of constitutional communications and processes. Catherine's private consultation with security specialists about protecting the children from future intelligence threats resulted in significant changes to how the family's private life would be managed. New procedures for communications, travel, and even routine activities were designed to prevent the detailed monitoring that had characterized the recently discovered operation. The media strategy for addressing public curiosity about the unusual security activity at the palace required careful balance between maintaining operational security and providing sufficient information to prevent speculation that might be more damaging than the truth. The decision was made to acknowledge that a security review had been conducted without revealing the extent of the surveillance operation or the involvement of foreign intelligence services. The technical countermeasures implemented throughout the palace complex included advanced signal detection systems, regular sweep protocols, and secure communication systems that would be resistant to the types of intrusion that had characterized the hostile operation. The new security architecture was designed to detect and prevent both physical surveillance devices and digital intrusion attempts. The personnel security review that followed the discovery of Morrison's betrayal resulted in significant changes to background investigation procedures and ongoing monitoring of individuals with access to sensitive areas. New protocols included regular financial monitoring, lifestyle assessments, and psychological evaluations designed to identify potential vulnerabilities that could be exploited by hostile intelligence services. The International Intelligence Sharing Agreement established in response to the surveillance operation created new mechanisms for allied nations to coordinate their response to similar threats. The detailed technical intelligence gathered during the palace investigation was shared with allied services to help them identify and counter similar operations that might be targeting their own institutions. William's final decision regarding the public disclosure of the surveillance operation reflected his balance between transparency and security concerns. The prince chose to acknowledge that a security incident had occurred and had been successfully resolved without providing details that might compromise ongoing intelligence operations or provide information that could be useful to other hostile intelligence services. The long-term impact assessment conducted by government analysts concluded that while the immediate threat had been neutralized, the intelligence gathered during the 18-month operation would provide lasting value to hostile intelligence services. The detailed insights into royal family routines, decision-making processes, and security procedures would remain useful for future intelligence operations or influence campaigns. The memorial service for the trust that had been violated by Morrison's betrayal was a private moment for William and the royal household staff. The prince addressed the assembled staff members, acknowledging the betrayal while reaffirming his commitment to the family-based relationships that had always characterized the palace community. The service marked both an end to the immediate crisis and a beginning of the rebuilding process. The final security briefing confirmed that all known surveillance devices had been removed, all compromised computer systems had been replaced, and new security protocols were fully operational. The palace was declared secure, but everyone involved understood that the royal family's relationship with privacy and security had been permanently changed by the discovery of how thoroughly their lives had been monitored. As normal operations resumed at the palace, the visible changes were minimal, but the invisible transformations were comprehensive. New security procedures, advanced technology, and heightened awareness would be permanent features of royal life. The crisis had ended, but its lessons would influence how the monarchy approached security and privacy for years to come. The investigation that had begun with Martin Thompson's sharp observation of a tiny device had revealed an intelligence operation of unprecedented scope and sophistication. The successful disruption of the surveillance network had protected the royal family and provided valuable intelligence to allied nations, but the cost in terms of privacy, trust, and peace of mind would be felt for far longer than the 5 days it had taken to resolve the immediate crisis.